Good evening. Covent Garden has ground to a standstill as one of the busiest junctions is blocked by climate change protesters. Extinction Rebellion began 2 weeks of action in the capital this morning. A giant pink table was the centrepiece, with protesters and their families stopping traffic as they tried to make their voices heard. After a summer of extreme temperatures, fires and floods across the world, the protesters have a simple message that the government must act and act now. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is in Covent Garden for us. Simon, what's happening now?
Duncan, for 6 hours now, the Extinction Rebellion protest has been unable to move from Covent Garden. The activists are surrounded on all sides by lines of police. It's a tactic known as kettling, and it's designed to keep demonstrators in one place until they give up. Extinction Rebellion returned to the streets of London with another pink totem. Not a yacht this time, but an oversized table. The climate change protesters set up camp at the junction of 6 streets, bringing Covent Garden to a standstill. This was now a no-go area for traffic. In his day job, Pete Knapp is a scientist specialising in air quality. He's also an Extinction Rebellion activist.
We chose this spot because it's a place where the global eye is looking. We want this to be a wake-up call ahead of COP26, and you can see here that the number of people here, hopefully that message will get out around the world. That's what we're aiming for.
It's clearly been organised in absolute secrecy, and they have extraordinarily managed to block this junction with a massive, great big pink table. The police didn't know where they were going, what they were doing.
Keeping the police guessing was all part of the plan. To the constant beat of protest drums, the Extinction Rebellion supporters began day one of their action with a march from Trafalgar Square. They headed along Charing Cross Road, coming to a standstill at regular intervals. At Cambridge Circus, a handful of protesters used a banner to stop the traffic as the march changed direction.
We're preventing the traffic from coming through so that the march can go down this street.
I appreciate they've got causes, but there's people that, have got to do their jobs.
Before they set off, the marchers were told by one of Extinction Rebellion's founders they weren't a protest movement, but an active rebellion against the British government.
We feel that disruption is probably the only way to make the point of how serious the climate crisis is.
We feel, as older people, we really need to take a lead.
Do you regret the disruption you're causing to businesses?
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry we're causing disruption, but there's much greater disruption already happening around the world.
The question now was, how would the police respond? In 2019, when Extinction Rebellion closed Waterloo Bridge, the Met faced criticism for allowing it to happen. The tactic today was soon apparent: kettling. The police officers have been given a simple instruction: anyone who leaves won't be allowed back in. That means the protests can get smaller, but it can't get bigger. The lines of police blocking the streets took many protesters by surprise.
I tried to dash through, but they tried to stop me.
With the main body of the protest corralled in one place, it became a waiting game.
Simon, you were quizzing the organisers there about disruption. Just how much disruption is all of this causing then?
Well, no traffic could get into this part of Covent Garden, and quite a few surrounding streets have been closed. So that's bad news for the taxi trade and for the many businesses here which rely on deliveries. Now, Extinction Rebellion is threatening 2 weeks of action in London, and this is just day one. We don't know how long they're going to stay here in Covent Garden, but one thing is for certain: they're not going to be starved into submission. There's a pub, a couple of restaurants, a sandwich bar and a burger bar, all within the police kettle. Although I have to say that when I checked a few minutes ago, the queue for the toilets at Pret looked uncomfortably long. OK, Simon, thank you.
Police have made several arrests today after forcibly moving climate change activists from a protest in Whitehall. It was the second day of action by Extinction Rebellion in central London. Tonight, the group have brought traffic to a standstill again in Cambridge Circus in the West End. Our political correspondent Simon Harris will be there in a moment, but first, his report on the day's events.
Day 2 of Extinction Rebellion's latest attempt to disrupt London, and Whitehall was brought to a standstill. Activists parked themselves in the road outside the Treasury, forcing traffic to be diverted. Some chose to chain themselves together, so-called lock-ons.
There's pipes inside here, and we've got chains around our wrists, and there's a rod in the middle, and we're locked on here.
How long will you stay?
As long as it takes.
It's cold. You can't move your wrist or anything in there. It's uncomfortable.
How will the police get you out?
I have no idea.
But they will.
Yeah.
Climate activists from Wales took the lead on this protest. Paul was spurred into action by flooding at his home, but he wasn't expecting to be here for long.
It's possible that they'll want us gone in the next couple of hours. Yes, we'll play it as it comes, but we're prepared to stay here indefinitely. We haven't got a fixed end time.
To begin with, police appeared to be taking a relaxed approach to the disruption. The protesters have been outside the Treasury for almost 3 hours now, and so far the police have made no attempt to move them. Whitehall, meanwhile, is closed to traffic. But then, just after 1 o'clock, police officers were seen giving instructions to the activists in the road.
If we didn't move by 1:30, then we would be occupying this road illegally.
We're allowed to go to Parliament Square, where we're allowed to be non-disruptively protest. So, of course, it's not protest if it's not disruptive.
Shortly afterwards, the speakers on a police van began to broadcast a message.
You have until 1:30, so to cease causing an unlawful obstruction. If you do not leave the road, you will be arrested.
And that was the beginning of the end. As most protesters obeyed the instruction, specialist officers moved in with cutting tools to release the rest. But they weren't free. One by one, they were carried to police vans to be driven away.
Everyone will realise.
So look, we're ready to go. Police, I appreciate you want to have your say, but we've got other people in the van as well. We need to get in the cage and go, please.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Most of those who defied the police deadline to move before 1:30 were arrested. The operation to end the protest was swifter than yesterday's. There, police didn't start making arrests until late in the evening. This afternoon, traffic was again moving along Whitehall.
Simon, how are things looking this evening?
Well, Duncan, there's a big police operation underway here in the West End after the Extinction Rebellion protesters transferred their activities from Whitehall. Cambridge Circus, at the busy junction between Charing Cross Road and Shaftesbury Avenue, has been closed tonight, right at the start of the rush hour. As you can see, there's a white hire van parked in the middle of the junction. On top of it is one protester, another one or two are on the tailgate, and a couple appear to be chained to the chassis, sitting or lying on the floor. Now, this is the second time today, as we've seen, that Extinction Rebellion have managed to close the road. This one's a really busy road at this time of night. As you can imagine, the West End is already packed with people coming out for the night, but traffic has had to be diverted after police set up roadblocks in the surrounding area. Now, we've seen a lot of police activity in the last few minutes. They've made this a sterile area so the protesters can't get anywhere near the van, and crews with cutting gear have gone in to try to remove those protesters attached to it. Meanwhile, the rest of the Extinction Rebellion activists are partying, as you can hear, on Charing Cross Road behind me.
Simon Harris in central London, thank you. Good evening. As time runs out to evacuate civilians from Afghanistan, London's MPs say they are overwhelmed with requests from Londoners asking for help. Some are trapped there, others have made it to the UK but are desperately worried about their families. The last flights for civilians could be as soon as Friday. UK forces have brought out more than 2,000 people in the last 24 hours, but the evacuation flights will have to end some days before the troops need to leave. The Foreign Office says staff are working tirelessly, but MPs here say it is frustratingly difficult to get a response to their calls for help. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
Khan is haunted by the pictures from Kabul. His family are among the Brits trying to escape the Taliban. His wife, baby daughter, young son, parents and disabled brother have unsuccessfully tried to get into the embassy compound. Like many Londoners with family in Afghanistan, Khan doesn't want to be identified for fear of Taliban reprisals.
Very, very frightened. I can't even sleep. I'm very worried about my family because I don't know when they will get back to the UK. As you must have heard, the Taliban doesn't want to extend the 31st of August. They want everyone to be out of the country, and then I'm very worried.
What happens if they stay?
They might die. That's the simple answer. They might die.
Hadi and his family, who live in Southwark, were lucky enough to get on an RAF flight, but not before a terrifying journey to the airport. They then faced an anxious wait before they boarded the plane. They're now in a quarantine hotel, grateful to be out of harm's way.
The deadline for withdrawal of the American troops is, for a lot of Afghans in Afghanistan, is like the date of execution. So a lot of them are waiting to be executed. They don't know about their future.
London MPs say they've been inundated with pleas for help from constituents who are either trapped in Kabul or who have relatives unable to get out.
Unfortunately, inevitably, our constituents, not surprisingly, are getting back onto us saying what's happened with our case, and we get back onto the Foreign Office and the Home Office and say, have you got the information? Are you being able to process them? When will you be able to call them forward to get a flight? And we don't get any feedback at all.
The government says it's doing all it can.
We will try and maximise the window to get civilians out, the British nationals, the Afghan workers. In the last 24 hours we've got 2,000 out, so we're going to use every hour and day that we have remaining to get the maximum number out that we possibly can.
The countdown to the final evacuation flight has begun. For Londoners caught up in this crisis, there is growing anxiety about the coming days. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Simon, the scale of this is really huge, isn't it?
Yes, it's hard to put a precise figure on it, but I've spoken to MPs, London MPs from the three political parties, and they all say the same thing. Their offices are dealing with multiple requests for help from Afghans, either wanting to get back to London or trying to start a new life here. What's frustrating the MPs, as we heard from Harriet Harman there, is that they pass on all these names and all these details, but there's no follow-up. They don't know what's happening to these people. Are they safe or are they still there? And the Lib Dems think that the system needs changing, and they're calling for a temporary call centre to be set up.
OK, Simon, thank you. After days of disruption because of Extinction Rebellion protesters, today the pushback. The leader of Westminster Council wrote a strongly worded letter to City Hall. In it, Rachel Robothon speaks about her deep concerns over policing and calls for clear action to keep disruption to a minimum. A message echoed by those caught up in the demos too, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
For 4 days, activists have targeted central London. Demonstrations by supporters of Extinction Rebellion have closed roads and disrupted lives and businesses. Yesterday, Haz Ahmad's taxi got stuck in the gridlock. He's had months of uncertainty about his health and was going for an MRI scan. He missed his appointment.
I believe in climate change. I think everyone should, and I think Extinction Rebellion may have some good aims, but the way to go around it, disrupting ordinary people's lives, especially after 2 years in COVID, everyone's had their medical appointments delayed and so many people have had to rearrange their life around things.
The leader of Westminster City Council has written to London's Deputy Mayor for Policing saying, "I would welcome clear action from you and the police to improve access for our residents, businesses and those visiting our city."
Nobody is in denial that we have a climate crisis and we've all got to work together to tackle climate change. But to bring central London to a standstill, to disrupt local people's lives, to stop local businesses being able to recover after COVID, it's unacceptable.
Today's disruption started at Hyde Park Corner, where activists set off on a march towards Westminster. Once again, traffic ground to a halt.
I think they should get a proper job, have a bath, and stop breaking up, making the traffic in London worse, We've all got a right to demonstrate, mate, but they're stopping everyone working.
But Extinction Rebellion was making no apologies.
Blocking a few road junctions, it isn't bringing London to a halt at all. It's bringing a couple, there's 11,000 road junctions in London. I think this is, when you look at the bigger scheme of things, this is a tiny amount of disruption.
The protesters ended up outside the Department for Business amid a growing row between Westminster Council and Extinction Rebellion over the cost of clearing up. Westminster Council says it collected 120 tonnes of rubbish after a previous Extinction Rebellion protest in October 2019. And that led to £50,000 of council taxpayers' money being diverted from other services. Extinction Rebellion insisted its activists were scrupulous about tidying up.
These are environmental protesters. They will clean up after themselves if given the chance. But if they're being marched out of a space, potentially in handcuffs, you cannot expect them to take all their things with them. They would if they could.
Tonight, an organisation calling itself Animal Rebellion claimed responsibility for a paint attack on the fountains in front of Buckingham Palace. The group said it was part of the 2 weeks of direct action promised by Extinction Rebellion. Simon Harris, ITV News, Westminster.